Tanner Wendell is a unique coach for a very specific type of person. He helps high-profile and high-performing entrepreneurs that run multi-7, 8, and even 9-figure companies build operating systems in their marriage and in their life. Because his entire premise is that just like you have an operating system in your phone or computer and you have operating systems in your business, if you want to keep up in your marriage and life at the rate upon which your business is growing, you need an operating system there as well. In this interview, we sit down and discuss what that looks like, kind of his background, traditional roles in marriage and in business, and a whole lot more. Without any further ado, let's cut over to this interview with Mr. Tanner Wendell. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Golden Mic. We're going to dive right in. Mr. Tanner Wendell, I'm excited. We were to have you on for many reasons, but we were talking beforehand, and we were talking about the gym and my journey in the gym from 146 when I started to 171. We're gonna get to 175 by the end of this quarter. Are you in the gym?
I've got a gym in my house, like
In your
literally
house?
right on the other side of this. Yeah.
Oh, nice. We put one in for my wife, and like I got a squat rack over there I haven't set up yet. I'm too lazy. I'm like, dude, if I don't have a personal trainer,
Yeah.
I ain't trying to work out by myself. That sounds horrible.
Yeah.
Anyway, dude, welcome. Appreciate you coming on. And making time for this. Like I said, I'm excited. For those people that don't know you, give us a 30-second to 2-minute recap. Yep. I don't even know if I know your story entirely, right? Like I feel like we've been connected in the Facebook world land for several years, and we've like watched each other from afar, and then we kind of connected around Warrior and then, my stuff and all that jazz. But like fill me in on how you got here.
Yeah. So the cool thing about us is we both come from small towns, right? So I grew up in a town of 1,000 people, middle of cornfields in Nebraska.
That's right.
Yeah, so we got a lot to jam on that. Basically, man, like I come from a family with a 90% divorce rate. All my aunts and uncles, my parents divorced, like pretty much every family member divorced except for my grandparents on both sides. And they just didn't divorce because that generation just didn't do that. So they believed in just being, miserably married until death.
Yeah.
And so that was my experience. And so, by the time I was 24, I became a dad, not married, and got married a year later, and then divorced before I was 30. That lasted about 3 years. And that was really kind of my wake up call of life, to where I realized like, maybe I don't have this thing figured out. Like I was kind of living like I did before, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't listen to anybody. And, before I was 30, like, I feel weird because I'm like, when I was your age, right? Like basically 29, even though it's only like 8 years ago. But back when I was your age, before 30,
I'm 30 now, bro. I'm 30.
Oh, you're 30.
I just turned 30. I'm officially in the 30 club.
Yeah. But there's kind of these decade transitions where you're kind of like, you look at like, what am I doing with my life as I turn the page?
Yeah.
And so that was for me going into 30. I was a dad. I was divorced. Like I had smoked weed pretty much every day since I was a teenager. Alcohol was a problem in my life, and divorce was really a wake up call for me. It's where I first really started getting in shape. Speaking of exercise, I was just like, it's the one thing that I can control, right? I felt like my world was chaos, but I was like, I feel like I can control this, and I'm doing this, and I'm feeling good about it. And ultimately, man, that led to getting into network marketing, which led me to personal development. There's a lot of things you can say about network marketing, but it's like, it led me to personal development books, which led me to personal development seminars, which like literally led me to a completely different life in my 30s, right? And so that journey led me out of corporate America and tech, and sort of what I had defined as success.
And you were in tech before this, up until this point?
Yeah. So like my version. So I grew up small town Nebraska.
Yeah.
I got a computer when I was like 10 or 12. And my parents were like, "This is the future." And I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
So, it's like Windows 3.1, which is like nothing, right? So I click around, like, how does this thing work? And then I got a CD burner, and I started downloading songs on Napster, ripping CDs, selling them to the high schoolers when I was in junior high. So that was like kind of a cool thing, right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was illegal, but I was just like,
there's a lot of stuff we did though, bro. Right.
Huh?
Right. I don't think a lot of stuff we did, I don't think we realized was illegal back
Yeah.
then, for sure.
Right. So it's like
Yeah.
I learned how to burn CDs and then get on porn sites and like chat groups. So I was in like adult like AOL chat groups when I was like a teenager, right? Crazy stuff.
Crazy.
But that was my life. And that was like small town Nebraska was like, bing, I've got a connection to the world. And
What part of Nebraska?
So Grant, so it's like just south of Lake McConaughey. So like 20
Oh,
minutes
okay.
off of Interstate
yeah.
80 and literally
Yeah,
like
yeah.
20. Yeah.
My
Yeah,
wife
so
is
like 4
from
hours.
my wife is from Valley, which is like 30 minutes north of Omaha.
Yeah.
So we
Okay.
drive that highway past Lake McConaughey all the time, and
Yep.
every time we go back visit her family. So I know, yeah,
Yep.
I know where that's at. That's crazy. That's crazy.
So kind of like, well, I don't know. I'm curious to hear your, but like for me, I always felt like I was trapped. I was like,
Oh my gosh.
I knew that I wanted to get out of there. Most of my other, friends at the time were like, I'm taking over the farm. I'm going to go sell seed corn. Like, I'm going to go raise the cows. And I was just like, that's not me.
Yeah.
My parents owned a chemical business, right? Sold chemicals and fertilizer. And I remember my dad, I was like 11 or 12 years old. And my dad's like, do you want to take this over one day? And I'm like, no. And like the next year, he sold the business and then moved, cheated on my mom. My parents got divorced. So like that was a major like thing for me that I put a lot of weight on early on to be like, oh my God, if I would have said yes and they would have kept the bit right, just all this stuff. And so when I sort of had to confront all that, going into my 30s, I was like, dude, everybody on both sides of the family is divorced. Like, this wasn't your fault. Clearly, there's some patterns here at play, and this will continue to play out in your life unless you figure out like a different way to do this.
Yeah, and do you think that it's interesting. I hear a lot of people put a lot of weight or emphasis on, like if they were the problem in a divorce, but more so of just like family traditions or like of like, I don't know, like emphasis on the importance of family. And I'm not downgrading that per se, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of people like tradition for the sake of tradition or like is important or like they feel like they have more sway in their family than they do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. And they put it on themselves. And I feel like one of the things that, like, I've got my own family trauma, don't get me wrong, right? I've got my own trauma in a lot of ways, but like I feel like one of the things that one of the things that made it to where it wasn't so hard for me to deal with some of the family issues or whatever is like I didn't care. Like I was disconnected from it. Like people are like, my middle name is William, right? And like my grandfather's name is William, right? And and they're like, if you have a son, are you gonna name his middle name William? I'm like, nope. And they're like, why? I'm like, because I don't care. Like I don't feel, you know what I mean? Like I don't feel that like connection to it. And I feel like a lot of people do. And I feel like because of that, they put a lot of pressure on themselves to act or operate a certain way. Like, do you feel like that?
Yeah. So let me say this. Like, I think I did, to the extent that I had two cousins, two male. Well, obviously they're males. So two male cousins who both got girls pregnant in high school, and they were older than me. And so, like, I literally believed, like, because I'm a Wendell, like, I'm probably going to get a girl pregnant in high school. And so that story then meant I had unprotected sex in high school. Like, I was literally like, I didn't want that to happen, but I was also like, that the narrative was running in my life. And so whatever it is, right? Whether it's,
but do you think that was subconsciously, like, a lot more about this stuff than I do, right? Like a lot more now, right? Because you've been through, and I don't know a whole lot as far as like generational things or whatever. But like, do you think that like subconsciously, perhaps it was like you're carrying on the family name, like not actually, like not with a badge of pride, but it was like, because that's what my family did, that therefore I must do also type of deal.
Like kind of, and I think there's a thing. I don't know if you've ever heard this. I know, like you're a church person. I feel like this comes from church. Like generational curses. Have you ever heard this?
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
big time.
right.
Big time.
So it's
Yeah.
like alcoholism, these certain things, and so to
Anger,
me,
aggression, cheating. Yeah, all the things. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So to me, and then we have this question. There's always this question, and you've got a new daughter, right? So you'll get this, which is like nature versus nurture.
Yeah,
And so to me, I think environment plays a huge factor.
for sure.
And so because I grew up in a small town where it's like literally everybody lived within 10 miles, like my grandparents on both sides, my
Yeah.
aunts and uncles, like a dozen family members, is like we were all in one of like 3 towns
Yeah,
within
that's my
less
wife's
than
family,
30
yeah.
minutes.
Yep.
Echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
And then you're around a bunch of other dysfunctional families.
Yeah.
And so it's just like echo chamber, echo chamber. And so to me, I think the thing that I realized, and this was part of me like accepting Jesus and the story of the Bible, it was like my ancestors are talked about in the Bible. Like my ancestry started with Adam and Eve. It didn't
Yeah.
start with my mom and dad or my grandparents.
That's a good
And
point.
right. And so that's been extremely helpful for me to actually zoom out. And it's actually one of the things that I like work with guys on is like, dude, your destiny is not what your dad or your granddad did.
Yeah.
Your destiny is this massive story, which if you'll open up the Bible, you'll see that God loved us in the beginning. Man fucked it up from the beginning.
Yeah.
Jesus came to restore it. And like, that's the actual story of humanity that continues to play out.
Yeah.
But people get so focused on my family, my this, my that, their immediate sphere, whether or not they grew up in a small town, big town, whatever. They're dialed in on their family.
Yeah, it's so fascinating too, because like I've been blessed, I think, to see both sides of family, right? I've seen the dysfunctional sides of it, and then I've also seen my wife taught me a lot about family. My family on my side, I have a good relationship with my mom and my dad and my brothers and sisters. But my dad has a very interesting relationship with his family, and you talk about generational curses. I say this often. Like my dad was the oldest of his family. And like, he's the one that broke those, right? Like literally in so many ways I can't even explain. Right. And even his siblings would tell you that, and probably even his parents at this point. Right. I mean, it was very, very interesting. So I got to see that, but we were also very disconnected, right? In the sense of when I was like 10, almost 11 years old, like my dad's family has a business out in LA, like family business. And I mean, it's wildly successful, right? Like, and like, we packed all of our stuff in the back of an RV when I was 10 and drove across country to the middle of a cornfield in Indiana to like get away from it. Like when I'm talking about breaking stuff, like my dad walked away from money, and he walked away from all of it to like go and pursue God and what he thought that the calling was. And like, I mean, literally changed the course of our family history. Right. And so for me, like when I look at family, I'm like, yeah, family's family. They're there. They're part of your life. You're not going to get rid of them. It's just like, that's just what it is, right? Like we've got family all over the country, and dad's family's there, mom. And then I go to my wife's family, and my wife's family is like exactly like yours, like generation on generation on generation on generation on generation of farmers in like one area of Nebraska, right? Like forever, right? And like, I got to see that and the dysfunctions of both sides and the positives of both sides. And to me, I'm like, this concept of like, this is how it should be. I'm like, I don't subscribe to that, or I don't even know if that's maybe. Well, I guess.
But I think so. Didn't
you know what I mean?
Get you? I feel like by nature, from what I know of you, you're kind of a contrarian, right? Which I am as well. Which is probably why we jive. But didn't you get a message like growing up with a religious background of like respect your elders?
Oh, for sure. I was terrible at it.
I think a lot of people take respect your elders with like fit your life into the box that your parents think your life should be in.
Or even just the elders around of the church should be in, right? Like I'm going to give massive credit to my parents. Like my parents did a lot of things right? Like the money issue was one of those things where, that part didn't get figured out, but like, let's be honest, in the grand scheme of things, that's not, if you're going to mess one thing up, probably mess that one up, right? Like they've got the relationship with God right. They got the prioritization of marriage right. Like my parents are still together.
Yeah.
Like and have been through some shit, dude, right? And like they stayed committed, right? So like I got to see what it was like to fight for your marriage and stay together. I got to see what it was like to be committed to a church and to be committed to religion. And like even if I might not have agreed with everything that they did, like they gave a reason for it, right? Like so I got to see those things. And so like my parents were very supportive. My parents did not understand my path,
Sure.
but they were supportive of it.
Because
all
they
of
have
the
the
elder
love piece.
right.
Like, hey, we love you. First commandment is
Unconditionally,
love. Yeah.
right? Unconditionally. However, the church and the people, elders and people there, very different story in the sense of like, that was like, I was condemned is not the right word. I certainly wasn't approved of in a lot of what I did, right? And so like I'm like I am loyal to my parents not because of like like a bloodline or to carry on something. I'm like I don't know because the Bible says children obey your parents in the Lord, right? Like you will be blessed, right? And I just see so many people that are like, well, this is what my family did, or my family would disapprove if I operated this way. I'm like, I'm and who cares, right? Like I don't have it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, dude. In the men's work that I do and that I've done and selling, to guys that were older than me, 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, it still runs
crazy.
A lot of men at that. Like, it's not something you outgrow. Like I've heard 60-year-old men talk about, oh, my dad that like right under the surface gonna burst into tears about trauma they've never dealt with their parents and like things they've been holding on to. And to some degree, like parents are in the grave. Right? It's like they're not even alive anymore. Like, what are you trying to, oh, I'll never live up to this, I'll never that. And I'm just like, dude, what are you doing?
How did you get past? Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
How did you solve that? Because like I mean, I had a coach and like I didn't know I was hiring the coach for that. I thought I was hiring the coach for business help or something, right? And then she was like, who are you? And I'm like, what do you mean? Right? And so like I was blessed through the loss of my brother and my wife getting in very, very sick and all that to come to a place where I hired a coach thinking it was for one thing, and I got a lot of coaching at a young age, right? How did you overcome it? Yeah. How did you figure out past? Because like 30s is still, it's not young, but like it ain't 60. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And like, I have somebody like just turned 40 and I'm like, dude, doesn't matter. Like you're creating your own path. You're guiding your family. And I feel
you still
like
got half your life left. Yeah.
I also like, I guess it's not necessarily a generational thing, but I'm noticing this pattern with millennials, right? We're the same generation of like, just this, there's this saying that I hate, which is like, oh, adulting, right? And I got to adult today. It's like, dude, I absolutely loathe that saying. But I think the fact that our generation would even use a saying like that indicates that a lot of us are still kind of this like in the child position. And so for me, like the simple answer is I realized that it wasn't working for me anymore. Like I had experienced enough pain and woke up to the fact that I actually wanted to have a good marriage. Like I didn't want the thing to happen that happened. I didn't want to be a divorce. I didn't want to repeat the pattern.
Yeah.
But I finally had enough pain, probably like, you at a certain level, we all sort of like change because of trauma or drama. Something wakes you up.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, now I'm going to choose a new path. And it's not like it was like, oh, one event and I went to one seminar and all of a sudden it's like, like, okay, everything's changed. But it was this like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
And if, right?
Good. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, and if this isn't working, then I have to figure out like what can work.
Yeah.
And then I started to look at like, and this is kind of my whole concept around like operating systems. I started to look at like, dude, we're not running Windows 3.1 or XP anymore, right? And we have phones, which we didn't even have phones when we grew up. And so I started to look at all these things and I'm like, all these old ways of being and doing, like they're not working. and our parents didn't grow up in the age that we grew up. And a lot of people
Yeah.
have fear around this and, oh, it was better back then. And it's like, it just is. We could look at
Yeah.
statistics that would say a lot of areas of life are actually a lot better right now.
A lot. Yeah.
So to me, I was basically like, I got to find mentors and coaches and people that are talking about this and figure out like who I am and how to navigate and what I believe. And quite frankly, like personal development was helpful, but it like, dude, it is really Jesus. And like,
Yeah.
and, you know, I think we share that of like coming to this place of like, who am I in this grander story? And like,
Yeah.
why am I here?
Yeah.
And knowing that like my life is now more than just, I'm the son of Chris and Terry Wendell who were divorced and da da da. It's like, I look at my parents as peers. And,
Mm.
and that's like something I encourage people to do. Like when you zoom out, it's not being disrespectful. My mom doesn't agree with a lot of shit that I do, but,
Same.
but right.
I love you, Mom.
But I do believe that like one of the things I constantly want to, like, I want to make my mom proud. I'm not driven by that anymore,
Yeah.
but I know that if I'm living my life to the fullest and helping people and serving and doing what I believe is like my purpose, I don't know how I could make her more proud than doing that, even if she doesn't actually understand what it all means.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. Two things. One, just a
Okay.
comment when you were like adulting, right? It's
Yeah.
it's hilarious. But it reminds me. There's a verse in James when it was like, when I was a child, I thought as a child, I acted like a child, blah blah blah, right? And then it was like, but when I
Yep.
became a man, I put away childish things, right?
Yeah.
And I think like millennials or just young people in general, they, like you said, they view adulting or they view growing up as a negative. And I'm like, not if you do it right, because
Correct.
like I'm telling you what, my life is way better now that I have responsibility. And like, can I go and smoke weed and trip balls in Vegas and on a weekend? Probably not, right? But like also the alternative is way better.
Yeah.
And obviously money is a big part of my life as far as teaching it and things of that nature, and so that plays a role. But I think that if you actually understood the alternative, like adulting is so much better than being a child, right? Like growing up and having responsibility and having people look up to you and having like, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
those roles and responsibilities are not a negative thing. They are so much better and so much fulfilling in every way. But because of the society that we live in, we think otherwise. And one of the things that you said was, and I'm curious, like when you were like, I just was like, I don't want, this isn't working, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
want this anymore. I am mind boggled by how many people I have met that have not yet come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
And when I present that potential conclusion to them, it's like a foreign concept to them, right?
Yeah.
Like I've lived in a bubble for most of my life on purpose, entrepreneurship or whatever. And like recently I hang out with more normal people, LOL, right? And I talk to them and I'm like, nothing in your life makes sense. And so I'm like, let me see if maybe there's something that I'm missing. And then I ask questions and I'm like, nope, you're just an idiot, right? Like, haha. But also like, have you not thought through anything, right? And so I'm curious, like you say like, I just realized this wasn't working, or like it's something that people naturally would just get to. Do you think that everybody can get to that conclusion or will have that experience by like on their own? Like, do you think that people will inevitably get there, or
Well,
how does that make sense? Like, do you
I
understand what I'm
do.
asking?
So there's a quote that I've heard, and I forget the woman. It's like Victoria or something, but the quote goes, "Most people prefer the certainty of misery
Ugh,
to
yep.
the misery of uncertainty."
Dang.
So it's kind of like you have a baby. Like I also use this example, like babies kind of like being in their wet, dirty diaper for a period of time. Because you take the diaper off and it's cold. The warm pee is actually kind of nice. And so, said another way, most people would basically just like to sit in their shit and bitch about their life than actually do
Yeah.
something about it.
Why
So,
though? Like like that.
yeah.
I
Okay, I'll tell
don't
you why.
get it. Like I don't get that. Like I conceptually get it, but I'm
Uh-huh.
like, there's never like I struggle with empathy. You know this, right? Like
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty open about this. Like empathy and patience. I'm like, I have no patience for anyone except my wife. She takes it all, right? Like she
Yeah.
gets all of it, right? But I'm like, I don't get that. Like I
Yeah.
don't care how you live your life. I don't care. I really don't. I support you in it. But the
Yeah.
second you start complaining, then I'm gonna be like, cool, can you fix it? And if the answer is yes, then shut your mouth and change it, right? And I don't get, so fill me in.
Yeah.
Like help me understand.
So two things. I mean, one, you have to realize the masses are the masses for a reason, right? And like it,
And Jesus
so
loves them.
don't fight with, I think Jim Rohn talks about this. He's like, don't fight with what's always been,
Yeah.
right? And so it's kind of like, okay, I mean, dude, trust me, I get it.
Yeah.
I have a house that I rent here, right? That we used to live in. I rent it, had people in there for 2 years. They're moving out of state. So I just listed on Zillow, and I'm reminded of like dealing with normal people. And I'm just like, dude, it's been 2 days and I took it off. I've had like 20 inquiries, 10 applications. And it's like, I literally took the listing off Zillow in 2 days because I'm like, I'm going to freak out on somebody. And so I'm like, I think I've got 2 or 3 people that are good, but I'm just like, I want to respond and I want to tell them and I want to be like, bro, you can't lie about your income. Like, and then I'm just like, nope, cool. Like you're going to do what you're going to do. There's a reason you're like a renter and you move houses every year. Like it just is. Right.
Yeah.
So there's that, which is like, you can't sort of argue with gravity and what is, but I think the other thing is you're dealing with somebody's identity.
Yeah.
And like, I've become really fascinated with this because like it was a big thing for my wife. She grew up Catholic. She lived in New York City. She like fought her
Wow.
way to get on Sirius XM radio. She was a host on Sirius XM radio for 20 years. She was
Wow.
held in this high regard. People like all this success. And then it's like, she never thought she'd move out of New York City. That was her entire life. And then she met me and and moved to Colorado, had 2 kids over the age of 40. Now she's
Wow.
in the suburbs. Now she has kids. Now she doesn't listen to the same music. Now she realized like the religion of her entire life for decades, Jesus was calling her to have a relationship and not all the rituals of the religion. And she's like, I don't know who I am. And I'm 40 some years old.
Yeah.
And then I start to talk to other people and work with other like clients, and I'm like, oh, that's what it's identity.
Yeah.
Like we're grappling, we're on like quicksand in terms of identity because the world is changing around us so quickly and we don't know what to hold on to. And the thing that I think sums this up best is, like bats like fly at night and they use like sonar, right? They use sounds to get their position. We've kind of lost the things that we can bounce off of. Like you and I grew up where it's like, you've got community, you've got family, you've got church, you've got things at school. You kind of had like 5 or 6 or 7 things where you're like,
feedback
hey,
loops. Yeah. All the time.
feedback loops.
Yeah, for sure.
This is my identity. And this is kind of what I cling to for better, for worse. You have
right. Right. Yep. For sure. No. Yeah.
Most people now don't have that. Everything, what we thought was true is not true. What the news says is not actually the news.
Right. It's what's, it's,
yeah. And so I think we now live in an environment that's so sort of mysterious to a lot of people, whether or not they'd use that word. And so they cling to the things that they know. And the things, even if those things that they know is a dirty diaper, a dysfunctional family, an addiction, like, so on the empathy part, I struggle with empathy. I've like, 2 daughters later and an ex-wife and a new wife, like a lot of relationships in my family. I've sort of gotten better at that. Not always. Just to realize on this specific topic, you're dealing with people's identity. And that's like the thing that is core, like foundational.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to shatter that and think about something like adopt a new identity because it feels like death, because it basically is.
It really is. I mean, identity was most of what Katie and I worked on. And, I mean, I was just at a point of, so much pain of, I went from feeling like I was on top of the world with, social media and business and whatever, to then death of brother and, wife getting sick and like going, living in the basement of my wife's or my girlfriend at the time, like mom's house over Christmas for a week because like, And it was all identity, right? And
But you had enough pain.
yeah.
You hit your pain tolerance. Most people, I mean, you've heard this in the personal development world. People either move out of pain or pleasure. 99% of people, it's pain.
Yeah, I know that it's not. I know that it's mostly it's pain or pleasure. I would argue I think it's all out of pain. Like I know you. I think you could make the. Like I know people are like, oh, like the top 1% they move towards pleasure or getting better or whatever. I'm like, I have yet to meet somebody, even at the top highest level, right?
Yeah.
Where the reason that they push is not is not avoidance of pain in some capacity, right?
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. I want to. You brought up an interesting point with the religion piece, and I want to ask about that.
Okay.
And how does religion play a role in how one chooses to live their life, positively or negatively? Right? Because you were talking about like the rituals versus the relationship. And like, I think that my experience is not, my experience is probably the experience of many. We all have our own path, but it's like this. It's religion made me hate God and the church. Right. And then I left. Like, I mean, I never said, oh, I don't believe in God anymore, but I like left church, right? Like like for several years did not step foot into it. And every time I would, I'm like these judgmental assholes, right?
Yeah.
And then I found God again. And then I found not just God, but then specifically Jesus. And then I had a relationship with Jesus, like recommitted my life to Christ. And for the first time, by the way, like I grew up thinking that Jesus was this, Jesus loves the little children type of person. And I'm like, I believe that 100%, but also like no one ever communicated to me like, hey, by the way, he's the king, like the king, like the one that reigns over all, the one that like took on all of death and all of darkness simultaneously at the same time by himself and won. That guy, like him, right? And like that guy wants a relationship with me, right? And like when that frame switched for me as like, wait a second, this all powerful, all being like king of all the universe wants this relationship with me. When that became the center, all of a sudden religion made sense because, and the analogy I was using, this was exactly with what you do is I'm like, when I decided that I loved my wife and that I married my wife, there was some rules and some guidelines that were put in place. Like, for example, I can't sleep with other women. Like, for example, I am never, ever, ever, ever am I allowed to cuss at my wife or yell at her. Like that's not a thing, right? Like I've never cussed at my wife. We don't yell at each other. We have disagreements and arguments, but we never yell, right? Like there are certain things that I like agreed to because I love her. But if I wasn't in love with her, if I didn't have a relationship with her, like if I would, right, then all of those rules would be dumb, right? I'm like, what do you mean I can't go hang out with my friends when I want, or whatever, right? So to me, religion made no sense until there was a relationship. And then religion started to make a lot of sense. I think most of us get it backwards, have the experience of it backwards. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on modern day, or not even on modern day, religion in general.
Yeah. So I grew up with very like mixed messages around religion. Like my most memorable sort of experiences are being at like Catholic funerals. And it's like, if you want to drive somebody further away from the building of a church, take them to where there's an old dead person and then recite the rosary and Hail Marys, like, I don't know how many times.
700
and I'm like,
times.
Yeah. I'm just like, no. Right. So like, I didn't want anything to do with it. My mom was raised Catholic, but she didn't go to church. And then my dad, like, we grew up in a small town, but there's like a half dozen churches.
Yeah.
And so I remember going to Sunday school, but it's just like, I didn't know the stories. I didn't know the Bible. Right. And like, in talking to my dad later, he was basically kind of like, hey, I just thought I send you to the school and they'll teach you. You go to Bible school, like you'll learn that. Like he had zero concept of like, crazy. Oh, we actually need to talk about things at home outside of that. Right. So I grew up with very mixed messages. And then when my parents, didn't get along, started divorce, my mom literally told me, hey, the only reason your dad goes to church and switches churches is because basically it's business development for your dad. He goes to whatever church his best customers go to.
Like a true entrepreneur.
whether that was true. And so, and I didn't talk to my dad for 15 years, and then we reconnected, and I learned a lot of things that like he actually did have a relationship with God in his own way. Right. And so for me, there's a couple of pieces here. I grew up with very mixed messages. It's not that I was atheist. It's not that I never was like, I don't believe in God or this. It's just like, I didn't know. I was ignorant about the Bible, and therefore I didn't want to talk about it. And therefore I would basically find any thread that I could use to sort of make fun or condemn or push back on. Right. And so I lived my life,
which
like
I think
that.
is a very common thing to do. And the Bible's insane, dude. The Bible's you read the Old Testament and you're actually like, what the actual F? Like, what is this book? Right. Yeah. And then you're like, then it gets to the New Testament. It's like, and then Jesus came to die and loves you. And you're like, yeah, but like, what the world, right? Like, out of context, the Bible is the most messed up, history piece, right? Like,
and here's what I would say is it's also literally everything about humanity is in that book.
Yeah.
So people will go, oh, we're living in different times, or, oh, the world this, or, oh, that, or, oh, things sure used to be better. And I'm like, have you read the Bible?
Yeah.
Because from the beginning, we've been trying to kill people, rape each other. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've been doing this since the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, that was back to the, like, my parents are peers and I'm part of a greater story. That was like the biggest thing to be like, dude, it's not just about your life. It's not just about your family. It's about humanity.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that was helpful. But I was very ignorant about it. I got mixed messages about it. And as a result, I got defensive about it. And I think people do that with religion. I think people do that with other areas of
their marriage, their business, all
everything.
of it. Yeah.
I don't know. So I'm going to this, and then I'm going to make fun of people or pick on the people that are promoting a positive path forward. See it on the internet every day.
Yeah.
What it was for me, like, and I tell people, like, nobody could have educated me into an experience and a relationship with Jesus.
100%.
Again, credit network marketing. I was at a network marketing business conference over the weekend. They said, hey, by the way, conference is over on Saturday. You want to come back on Sunday? We do this like informal church service in the hotel conference room. Like, yeah, what the hell? Our flight
was
doesn't
it Mormon?
leave until
Was it Mormon?
No, it wasn't Mormon. No.
Oh, okay.
No, it was, I mean, what I would just say, like, sort of non-denominational. I didn't know what to call it.
But like, a lot of network marketing is like, it's got some Mormon influence in it, right? You go to Utah and you're like,
wasn't that, we didn't have to drink any Kool-Aid. And so I was like, yeah, what the hell, like, let's go check this out. And part of it was because I valued, like, my mentors in that organization. And part of it, if I'm being totally honest, was like, the dude was jacked and he was rich. And so I was like, hey, if this jacked rich dude like bows his knees to Jesus and is weeping about this guy, you got my attention. I'll spend a couple hours on a Sunday to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
And, there was worship, there was guest pastor, there was all this. And, like, dude, halfway through, like, I'm weeping uncontrollably.
Yeah.
And they're like, if anybody wants to accept Jesus, come to the front of the room. And I knew, like, it was like, go to the front of the room.
Yep.
So I go to the front of the room, and my wife's like, what the hell? Like, what is going on? Right. She's Catholic. Son, she would go to daily mass. She was all this, and we would fight. We would fight. I couldn't even say the word God. I was like, the universe, this, and we'd argue about it. And so the cool thing is, like, we literally just realized this telling some people our story not too long ago. The cool thing is we both were ignorant about the Bible.
Yeah.
She was ignorant about the Bible growing up in a religion that told her what to believe and do the things and check these boxes. I was ignorant about the Bible because I didn't have that structure and I never knew how to, like, get into it. Yeah. So we got married and we started arguing about this topic. We would we would spend 4 hours on a Sunday.
Yeah.
We would go to Catholic Mass. And then we would go to my church, which was Science of Mind, which not Scientology, but it's this sort of, hey, universe, Ernest Holmes stuff. And the only reason I went to that church was because I knew I needed I wanted something to tell my daughter. And I didn't know. So I went to a funeral for a guy at this church. And then I was like, I guess I'll come back and just start going here.
Yeah.
Because I'd already stepped. Yeah. So the point is, real quick, is
Yeah, no, yeah, go.
we started arguing God, the universe, the Bible, and again, not yelling, but like this
Yeah,
is an
no, I
important
get it.
part of our family. And we did have these non-negotiables like you talk about with your wife. And one of them was around, religion or faith. And we had accepted we're both interested in this topic and we're moving forward, even though we're on very different paths with very
Yeah.
different beliefs. And so we started
Which,
talking.
by the way, is crazy because, like, I like the fact that you guys, I mean, worked through that and like I literally cannot fathom marrying or being married to someone with a different religion than I like. That's
and
props to you.
Political party affiliation.
Really?
Yeah.
Both, dude.
Yeah.
Like your divorce, like statistically, your divorce rate's like 80 or 90%. Like, I mean, it's insane. If you get those two, like, there's the 4 things: it's money, kids, or 5 things: money, kids, how you're gonna handle in-laws, politics, and religion. Right?
Yeah.
It's like those 5 things. If you line up on your marriage success rate, is like 90% or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? You had like 2 of them.
So for us, quick side journey here, and then come back. So for us, like I attempted to break up with her like 3 months in. I was like, oh, we shouldn't be together. I went to this like 10-day off the grid men's thing and came back and decided I was going to change everything about my life. But the reality was I actually wanted to be married and I wanted more kids. And she wanted to be married and she wanted more kids, or she wanted kids. She'd never been married, no kids. And so I just thought that I needed to break up with her because I thought I needed to change everything about my life. So we literally, she lived in New York City. Like we walked for 8 hours through New York City. Like, I don't know how many miles. Walking, talking. What about this? 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 Like I basically flew to New York to like end thing. I massively respected her. And I was like, I'm going to come and we're going to close this out. We're not just doing this over the phone.
Right.
And then we're like, what about that? Da, 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 da. And I'm like, oh, I guess we're actually largely on the same page. Right. And so we boiled it down to like 5 non-negotiables. Some of the things you mentioned, but it was for us, it was communication. Yeah. So similarly, nonviolent communication. We're not going to punch walls, break windows, cuss at each other, which we had both done in past relationships. Yep. It was about money. Hey, what's money mean to you? How do you earn your money? What are we doing? Right. We were on the same page that we wanted to have the freedom and control of our money. Family, in-laws, that sort of stuff. Yep. We come from very different paths, but it's like, here's how we want to raise our kids. Okay, cool. We're on that. Then it was around like, okay, this God piece. And it's like, we both believe in something, even though it's very different.
Yeah. Are you done with that?
No.
Okay, go.
Well,
go.
Ask a question. Yeah. That was a side journey.
No. Come back to it. Cause I want to, it's same line, but it's like kind of the next piece of this, the last piece that I wanted to go into. So finish up your thoughts on that.
Okay.
I'm yeah.
So the point is, we had these non-negotiables, and we're like, cool. We actually want the same things in life. Politics didn't matter, even though we were very. It was like the president, who we could argue about the president, but at the end of the day, like it's not going to matter in terms of how we run our family. Right. So it's like, that doesn't really matter. Yeah. That's an extra thing that we can argue about. But from our bloodlines, our families, it mattered very much. Yeah. Right. These tradition things, we're like, that doesn't matter. So we were on the same page about those things. And we were willing to just have this sort of like, conflict, disagreement. What about this? But we were also willing to accept each other's beliefs. So 4 hours of going on Sundays, dragging our kids, young kids. It's just like, this is what we're after. We're not going to not go to church. We're not going to, mom goes to that church, dad, we're doing this. We're going to figure this thing out. And the crazy thing is, like, I would say God used all of that scenario to get us to both open up the Bibles, to ultimately get on the same page, leave both of those churches, both of those religions, and end up like, couldn't be more aligned now.
It's crazy. I mean, and praise God. I mean, that's incredible. Yeah. And I think that sets up perfectly for the kind of, I say the final big question here, like as we, I mean, we still got time, but I just like, I know I like how you explain things. Like, it's good. Your flow and your stories, and like, they make a lot of sense. And it's okay. One of the things that you mentioned that I think is like spot on was you were like, hey, there's this dude who's rich and jacked. Right. And he's praying to this, God, or he's getting on his knees like that. Right. I know you work with a lot of men, entrepreneurs, successful, monetarily successful business, what have you, and
Yep.
maybe even successful in the gym as well. And
Yep.
so my question is I'd like, I mean, feel free to explain a little bit more about what you do if it makes sense to go and do that.
Sure.
But I really struggle with, or no, struggle is not the right word, wrestle with this concept of money and success in the terms of, like, if you look at the Bible or you look at Jesus's life or things like that. I mean, obviously, like, Jesus wasn't rich. I mean, like, some people are like, oh no, Jesus was secretly. I'm like, no, bro, that's not he was not secretly wealthy. Okay, like,
Yeah.
so you look at this and you go, okay, for the mass majority of people, right? Like money and success and those things, they're seen as bad. They're seen as like the opposite of God, blah blah
Yep.
blah, all of the things, right? However, then there's people like me and you, and then there's people that like are levels of success. And the thing is that, like, I don't actually care about how much money you have, right? However, I don't take you seriously on most topics unless you have it, right?
Yep.
Now, I may disagree with Garrett White on many things, but I think one of the things that he understands incredibly, incredibly well is he's like, if you don't like if people can't see you've got it, they're
Yep.
not going to pay attention, right?
Yep.
And I go, okay, there is a segment of people, like, I want to be wealthy. I want to be influential. Like, I want to have what the world would call FU money, and I want to have influence. Like, I do. I want to use that for good. And like,
Yep.
I hate the word, oh, for the kingdom. Like, okay, yeah, yes, for the kingdom, but like for Jesus. And like I want those things.
Yeah.
And also, I know that part of the reason, and I even think a large majority, like, if you put $10 million in my bank account right now, like, my life wouldn't change all that much. Like, maybe I'd, get my wife, maybe we'd have 2 more cars or something like that, right? I'd buy a Cybertruck, right? But like, whatever, right? Like, that's it. So I look at it and I go, okay, the reason I want it is because that's how people pay attention,
Yep.
right? And so I'm curious to know your thoughts on how monetary or material is not the right word, but you know what I'm saying. Like the success, the influence, the cars, the houses, the freedom, this plays a role in getting people to pay attention to Jesus, if that's maybe the wrong framing of the question, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Like,
No, I get it.
right?
Yep.
Because like, if I come to somebody who's an atheist, or if I come to somebody who's, and they're worth $500 million and can everything, there's basically nothing I can say that's going to get their attention unless they're in absolutely immense pain in its right place, right time. And yes, of course, I'm going to trust Jesus and all the things. Does that make sense,
Yeah.
though? So like, where does
Yeah.
that play in a role? Because I think maybe people listening right now that are maybe successful, or that are, struggling with this whole religion thing or the relationship thing or whatever, right? They're like, I'm not listening to a peasant, right? And like, I know that
Yep.
sounds harsh and rude and mean, but like, it's the reality.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a couple of things. So since you mentioned Garrett, and I work closely with
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
like, he has mentioned multiple times, like, the house, the cars, the things that you see, like, he doesn't really give a shit about him. Like, most
Yeah.
people wouldn't think that because
Yeah.
he posts and he positions himself, but he's like, at the end of the day, like,
Yeah.
and I think as his relationship is deepened, with God in his own way, like,
Yeah.
it's like, doesn't matter, but you have to have those things to get the attention of the people that need to hear the message about the thing
Yeah.
you really want to tell them. Right. And so it's kind of like the Trojan horse thing. Hey, I've got to have the stuff to show you. And then you realize, like, oh, wow, there's something to this. So to me, like, I heard this thing. So I had very mixed messages about money, right? Because my dad was, by most terms, a successful businessman. He sold his business. But what I saw was that tore my family apart. And so I had this, and my mom would say, oh, all your dad cares about money and this and da 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 da. But he was that like millionaire next door persona where it's like, drove the old car, wore the old clothes, you never know how much money he had. And getting to know him later on in life, like, he didn't actually really care about the money. Like, he cared about the game of making money. But it just
that's
twisted.
it. That's the thing. Like, I love my mom to death too, and whenever I talk about some of my wealthier friends, she's like, "When's enough enough?" I'm like, "It's not. Now's enough. It's not about enough, right?" Yeah.
So I think so one, it's about, like, okay, the game. Two, this, you can, there's difference in entrepreneurs of making money and keeping money.
For sure.
And to me, that's a capacity, like that's a capacity issue. What does the money mean? If the money only means the things, then you make the money, you spend the money, like, and it just perpetuates this cycle.
Yeah.
Right. So to me,
But
this idea that,
good.
yeah, go ahead.
No.
I was
Well,
going to say,
no, hold on. Actually, I do want to. I want you to continue, but I'm going to just slightly tweak my framing on the question of like. Okay. I do think that was an important point of. I am not saying that you should chase those material things. Yep. Or that like you should have the Lambo or the mansion or whatever. Blah, blah. What I'm saying is those are a representation that you are playing a game at this level, right? Yep. And like so for you, obviously, like with you do a lot with marriages and men and things of that nature, right? I think Correct. It's like it would be hard for you to walk into somebody's business and be like, that's made $50 million or $100 million, and I'm like, I'll be with business. You're like, who? Right. What? Right? But like they also have to know in some capacity that you understand that game enough. You don't have to be quite at that level, right? But you have to enough. And I think the battle that that like, because I've seen, I grew up not around money, and I get it. I know these people's heart are in the right place, right? But when they look, I get a lot of criticism, right? Like people, too much criticism, but like whatever about like, oh, you flaunt money this or like whatever. I'm like, yeah, but guess what? The people that are my friends that are, selling companies for tens of millions of dollars, I'm getting phone calls from them about, hey, by the way, Josh, when I looked around and I was like, who has the healthiest marriage? Like, you're the person I want. And I'm going to like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to go propose or I'm going to get you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, they're not calling me because I just have the good marriage. They're calling me because I have the good marriage and I play at their level. Does that make sense? And I'm curious. Yeah. So there. Go ahead.
Yeah. So a couple of things. And I think for me specifically, like one of the ways that like I demonstrate that is like, hey, we go on vacations. I take time away with my wife. Like that shit's not free. Right. Like it's got to come from somewhere. So I'm less interested in like, oh, this car, that car. I do have my reservation for the Cybertruck. I'm going to have a badass wrap, a whole plan for that. Right. So, but to me, where I got to just it's not directly answering your question, but it's like, I was driven by money in my like career in tech and climb the ladder and do this. And then I was like, well, that's pretty hollow. And then I meet my wife, New York City, certain expectation of things, want to live this way. And we collided a lot about that. And I'm like, you don't need material things. You're trying to fill a void, blah, 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 blah. And then I got to this point where I was like, God, if your people have made this, I want to experience the finest things that your people have made on your earth. And I have zero problem with that because they're here. They were made. This is his earth. The world is abundant. It's all his anyway. So we may as well enjoy it while we're here. Right. So that's been sort of my reframe.
But do you think go finish that thought?
Nope.
Sorry. Yep.
I was just saying that's been my own personal reframe around it. Right. In terms of money and the matters of it. Last piece for me, as you're talking about it, it's like, I've had a lot of mentors, and that list of mentors has gotten very small because I have to know that, like, you have a sound marriage, you take decent care of your body, as well as the ability to make money, and you have some sort of relationship with God. We don't have to agree on what the Bible says or this or that, but I have to know that those fundamentally things, those things matter, because I've learned from too many people that, like, had just the one category or the money. And then it's like a year later, they're announcing on social media, oh, we've decided to part ways, and everybody justifies, but it's amicable and we're friends, but please don't ask us about it. And it's like, but bro, you made your life around how great it was and showing your family and your wife. And now you're saying, hey, this is very private. Nobody talked to me about this divorce. And it's like, I've learned from too many of those people that I'm like, that's not what I'm trying to build.
Yeah. 100%.
So I'm not totally answering your question.
No,
but
no,
like,
no. It's setting up perfectly for kind of the paper I was going with is specifically in the context of religion. Okay. And like, do you like, I don't need the person that I follow to be loaded, right? Like you don't have to have $500 million for me to listen to you. But like, guess what? My pastor is jacked. My pastor takes care of his family and wife and committed to that. And guess what? My pastor was like, hey, I went through the struggle of being very, very bad with money, and now I'm good with it, right? And like my pastor, like he's not taking a massive salary from the church, but he's been smart. And like he is financially well off, right? To where he's not in a place of need. And I go, if you are broke, I have a hard time taking taking advice on how, like, because when you're operating at this level, right? Like
Mhm.
so many, like the decisions you make impact money and your health and your marriage like, at such a level that most common people, it sounds so bad, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, do you think that that's a problem? Like, do you think that you should take it religious advice or, the Bible advice from anyone? Or do you think that that it is a necessary component to have that level of success?
Could I learn from a broke pastor? Is that basically what you're saying?
Should you choose to consistently take it, not like one-off things,
Sure.
but like, could you consistently go and learn how you're supposed to operate and live life from a pastor that is financially broke
Or overweight? No, I can't.
or overweight,
I
right?
can't. Yeah, I can't. And I think dude, I'll give you a prime example. So there's a personal development seminar that's local here in Denver, had a massive impact in my life. The reason I signed up for that was because I went to a presentation that had people on the panel. Since I've been through
Yeah,
all the work, I've been asked to speak on their panel multiple times.
yeah,
My wife and I did this like last week. And the guy that was leading the presentation, overweight, he's been in this community for a decade plus and used an example in his presentation about like healthy habits. And if you're going to lose weight, you wouldn't start by running a marathon. You'd start with a mile, and standing in front of the room. And I'm like, and like closed like nobody, like a horrible percentage. And I'm just like, I can't listen to, like, I don't even want to be on this panel right now. Like, I can't listen to you. And I think that has been the problem with, like, if you want to talk like the church in general,
right.
hey, pastors that then are like, they have an affair, or they're begging for money, or then you find out the church funds were misappropriated, right? Like, and so it's like, if you actually believe in what's in the Bible, and you take it to heart that like there are rules, like literally you just read Proverbs. Like, well, the first time I read Proverbs, I'm like, wow, my life would have certainly been less fucked up if I would have just kind of looked at this and taken
Like,
things seriously.
right, right. And
I'm
it's
like, it's
like,
all here in
it's
one book.
all
It's
there.
all here.
And that's like, I do not require you, like, I don't require you to be rich and build this massively successful company. I do think that if you want to reach out to and witness to people that have $1 billion, that you gotta have to play at a higher level and you have some understanding of things, right? But like,
Yeah.
if you cannot go and like master the basics, like, I know it's like God calls everybody and everybody's leadership or whatever, but I'm like, I I I am still wrestling with this idea of like, you should go be a leader. It's like, no, 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 no. You want to be a leader? Here's how you be a leader. Lead yourself, lead your
Yep.
family, right? Ready?
Yep.
Get in shape, right? I struggled with getting in shape. So you know what I did? I hired a trainer. And then when
Yep.
that wasn't working to bite me plans, I was like, I paid him to show up at the gym every single day, right? And it's like, get in shape, have a good marriage, take care of your money, right? Like those
Yeah.
are, and then obviously, follow God, right? And
Yeah.
I think that we as, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say to think that those things are separate,
Yeah.
is foolish.
Yeah.
And I also, like, the mentor that I mentioned that got me interested in Jesus because of the worldly things. Like, he's not my mentor anymore because he's got this like weird dynamic in his like personal relationship. Like, he's been through divorce, that's totally fine, but then there's like weird thing in personal relationship and
Yeah.
some weird other things with other relationships that like he's had of people that I know that I respect. And so I was just like, oh, okay, like, you got my attention, but you didn't hold my attention, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, and I don't discredit those steps, but
Yeah.
here I guess here's how I would end this, right? And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like a lot of what I do, right, and to tie this like whole thing together,
Yeah.
right, is like, my mission is to help men become the family leader, right? Most
Mm.
men are in the passenger seat of their life. They're literally in the passenger seat of their car. Like, you can't unsee this. Look around when you look at stoplights now,
Oh, sir.
bro.
All the
You know what
time.
I'm talking about?
Oh, I do.
Like,
If I'm
dudes
in the car with
sitting
my
in the
wife,
passenger
what?
seats with their wives
What?
driving,
That
like
was
their
a stroll,
mom's
yeah.
fucking driving them to school, right? It's insane. But it's a metaphor for like what is happening
It's
in
like,
our
dude,
society.
that's what I mean,
And it's
though.
a
It's so
whole,
freaking simple. Like, it's
yeah.
like, what the? I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Finish.
So we're aligned on that. That's like a whole other like tangent of just like how we got here and all this other stuff. Doesn't matter. The point is, like, women are not actually happy. Like, they want the man to be successful. This idea of toxic masculinity and chasing money, blah, blah, blah. Sure, all of these things in a silo, it's like, yeah, too much of anything is a problem. And that's why I think this idea of like, cool, you've got to connect the relationships, the body, the spirituality, and, you know, like what you do for a living. The idea of just focusing on one of those, sure, it can lead to destruction, right? And those are generally the guys that I work with, which is, hey, I figured out how to have a level of financial success either through business or career, and I got to here, and I figured out how to have a level of relational success because I'm married with kids, but I've pretty much reached the point where, like, I've got chaos in my life and I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe fitness is an element because it's something, you know, you figured out fitness or you haven't, but it's like, you get to this point and it's like, dude, running your family the way that you grew up, which is pretty much the only blueprint we have, is not going to work. It's not the 80s anymore. It's not the 90s. It's not the 70s. Like, it is 2024. And the way that we're expected to lead and the way that we need to lead in the world, it's just different. And so
the principles are the same. The application is different.
100%.
Yeah.
So basically I say ancient wisdom with modern science practically applied. Right.
That's
so
good.
It's like, you could take the wisdom of the Bible. You could take the modern science of the last 100 years and the success movement and all of that stuff in the 1900s and Napoleon Hill and say, yes, this validated the wisdom principles. But it's like, we have to have a practical application, which I wrap up in an operating system for your life. Right. And it's like, do these things. And it's not hard, bro. It's creating the proper context and then getting guys to see, like, this is actually the only path forward, because the alternative is you numb out with drugs, alcohol, porn, whatever, and you basically just kind of avoid the reality of your existence. And I've seen that movie too many times. It leads to these guys in their 50s, kids grown, move out of the house, look at, like, the wife's like, I don't know who you are anymore. I've just put up with you because I didn't want to have pain on the kids. And like 20 years of marriage gone.
Yeah.
And guys devastated. Right. And so I saw that over and over and over and over and over again, working inside of, you know, the largest men's movement, or at least modern. And I was like, how do I do this for millennial men? How do I get guys that are in, you know, 10 years of marriage or less, kids that are under the age of 10, guys that still actually have hope? They're not as easy to market to because they don't quite have the pain of divorce. Yeah. But they do have the pain of, like, chaos and knowing, like, I don't really know what the hell I'm doing here. Yeah. And I'd rather just spend time at work because I get praised at work and I feel successful at work. But when I go home, like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Yeah. And it's like, no problem, dude. I've spent a decade of, like, massive amounts of pain figuring out what the hell to do to realize, like, you got to lead your family. Yeah. Yep. That's it. And I think you do a great job of that. And like, shout out to you. I appreciate because it. You learn the pain, like, you had the family background and then the pain, and then the money to actually invest and figure that stuff out. So by the time you're 30 and you have your first kid, you're like, okay, cool. I've got a pretty good handle on that. Most guys don't, as you know. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I got to give, and I appreciate it. I got to give credit to my parents for the relationship part of it. Cause like I said, like, the money part, there was a lot of pain there and I had to figure that stuff out. But I was very blessed. I had a roadmap of what it looked like to fight for your marriage, and I had a roadmap of what it was like to treat women correctly, and I got to at least see that. And so I think the work that you're doing is incredibly important, like genuinely. Like, and the idea of an operating system, I like the framing on that a lot, because I think it's something that makes sense. And the more, like, I think that anyone that has achieved any level of success understands systems, right? And it's like, oh, wait a second, if you could actually rewrite the operating system, like, I can rely on the fact that I might not know what that's going to be like, but I know what relying on a current operating system is. And if I'm just swapping those, I can rely on that fact. So, dude, where can people learn more about you, what you do? What's the best way to connect with you? Yeah. So thanks to you, I've got a podcast called Horizon OS, horizonos.com. And I'm building everything on that platform, which is basically how to create the future, just the conversations around creating the future. Facebook, Instagram, you'll have those links as well. Shoot me a DM if you want to engage in the conversation. Yeah. Which platform is the best if they wanted to reach out to you directly? Facebook's best. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, we'll link all
Yeah.
that down below. Cool, dude. With we're gonna wrap it up there if that's cool. We're gonna do a couple
Yep.
rapid fire questions, just because that's how we wrap up everything, and
Yeah.
we'll call it there. Is that cool?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right, rapid fire questions. Here we go. Number one, what is one bucket list item you have not yet achieved in your life?
I would say international travel, like Greece, something like that.
Nice.
Yeah, I
All
want to
right.
go. I want to see the world. I want to see God's beauty
Yeah.
more than I have.
Yeah. Tell you what, as someone who has traveled a lot, America's the best. My wife would disagree with you. My wife loves travel, but yeah. So cool. Who's one person that you want to meet before you die?
One person that I want to meet before I did. That's a good one. You know, I got to go with Elon. Like the dude's just such a character, right? And it's just like, bro, like, yeah.
Yep. Elon's my dude too. Yeah. The last person I interviewed that was the same one as Elon. I'm like, dude. I mean, what a dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's one book you think everybody should read?
Compound Effect.
Compound Effect.
Yeah, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. It was the first personal development book I read that made me realize like small actions lead up to big results in your life.
What's one, you're in the relationship space, so what's the biggest or a large relationship principle that has changed your life?
Responsibility. That like marriage is 100-100. It's not 50-50 give and get. Like if you give and take just responsibility for everything in your relationship and you give it your all, like reciprocity, like the laws of nature will come back to you. And I just think too many people are trying to get things and use their spouse and blame their spouse, but on both sides, men and women. And it's like, just give it all for you. And the rest will fall into place.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. All right, last question. Fast forward to the end of your life. You're on your deathbed, and every person, every man that you were called to impact, so not everyone you met, but the people that you were called to impact and lead, they forget everything, but you get to leave them with one final message that they will believe at face value and live out without question. What's the message?
Be the leader of your family, king of your castle. Like, that's really the only thing that matters. Everything else falls from there. And if you will just be the tip of the spear and like own your last name and what it means to be a whatever, Wendell Forti, and define that for your generation, everything else will be taken care of.
Yep, 100%. Tanner Wendell, everybody. Tanner, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
You bet, man. Thanks for the show.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Until next time. I don't know. Go out and I gotta find a sign off. I always used to have one now. So until next time, go do what Tanner said and make a bunch of money and change your life and be free. We'll see you next time. Peace.
See ya.